How's it going, New York Giants fans? My name is Alex, and my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo, and discussing today's practice, Saturday or rather Sunday, after FanFest and everything. Today, some good takeaways, a lot of red zone drills, a lot of running the football for the Giants. Some nice takeaways on the defensive side as well. A couple of undrafted free agents making a name for themselves, and late round draft picks, specifically linebacker Darian Beavers and safety Yusuf Corker out of Kentucky. So we'll talk about those guys. What they did today on Sunday during practice, and what kind of impact can these guys make moving forward. Yusuf Corker, UDFA, as I mentioned, a guy that probably will get a little bit more action, maybe a little bit more responsibility with Dane Belton, our rookie out of Iowa, going down. So he has that broken clavicle. Yusuf Corker probably will get some more reps in practice and maybe make enough of an impact to justify special teams usage, or maybe even get some reps in. He's a big guy, huge safety. So we'll discuss him a little bit, his statistics and what he's bringing over from Kentucky, what he can offer this New York Giants team moving forward. But Anthony, before we dive into the good stuff, how you do today, my friend?
I'm doing great, man. And, it's another interesting day of Giants practice. As you mentioned, there's some UDFA, some late round rookies that are starting to make an impact, starting to make a name for themselves as we gear up for the preseason. Of course, we're 1 week away from the preseason, less than a week away, just like 5 or so days away. Tonight, it's going to be real fun to watch the Giants play the Pats, get a little preseason action in, and see some of these young guys that we're hearing a little kind of here and there about. Maybe they're starting to pick it up. Maybe they could be fighting for a roster spot. Well, that battle really begins in the preseason, and it's right around the corner. So I'm super excited to see if Corker or Beavers, if they go out there in the preseason, make some plays. Richie James, he's another guy, not a rookie, but a veteran that's like kind of competing for one of those back end receiver spots. And Darius Slayton, also competing for one of those back-end receiver spots. And a lot of Giants fans seem to be on the outs of Darius Slayton. They don't seem to be too excited by him. Sounds like he could be on his way out. So a lot of great storylines as we're entering into the preseason. And another thing that I will highlight is rookies, right? We talked about some of these mid-round guys, just touch on them briefly, but I want to briefly touch on Kayvon Thibodeaux. Apparently, he's been all over the Giants' backfield in practice today. He's been dominating. He's starting to really ramp up here as we go towards the preseason, and he's starting to look like the number 5 overall pick, which we all know he's really going to hit a stretch at some point in the season. Once he puts his game together, we know it's going to be game over for the opponents of the New York Giants. So I'm super excited, man. Preseason almost here, and I just can't wait.
Yeah, man. Everything I've heard about Kayvon Thibodeaux has been nothing but amazing takes, right? Everything has been just progressive and developmental, and he's taken such a big role already with Azeez Ojulari kind of nursing that hamstring injury. He hasn't even been able to practice in training camp just yet. Kayvon Thibodeaux's been in the backfield all practice, and we're talking. And here's the thing: some people might say it's practice, yes, blah blah blah. He's been going 1v1 against Andrew Thomas for a lot of these practices, by the way. You know what I mean? He's doing a really good job defeating Andrew Thomas. I'm sure Andrew Thomas had his fair share of wins. We've seen a couple clips where he's had some really good reps against Kayvon. But that's the iron sharpens iron stuff that we want to see right now, is him going up against one of the best left tackles in football in Andrew Thomas, coming off a stellar year. So that's a really good sign for Kayvon Thibodeaux. He's winning against very talented players. And he's taking advantage. We've seen some really dominant reps against Evan Neal. For Kayvon Thibodeaux, which is a great sign. He's just kicking ass. And ultimately, I do believe that this pass rush duo of KT and Azeez Ojulari could be one of the best young duos in football by the end of the 2022 season. People might really be underestimating how productive and efficient they both can be. So that's really awesome. A couple updates on the injury front with John Feliciano. He actually was really dehydrated last week when they took him out. He's been missing practice pretty much every day, kind of getting worked in a little bit more now. But he said his whole body just gave out. Like, he was like shaking. He was cramping up everywhere. And they've been really easing him back in, but he's stayed sharp. And, he's still working on his mental game in terms of just getting prepared and knowing the system and knowing what opposing defenses are doing. So, he's been doing his fair share of studying on that end, but, he's getting back to normal. But it was a pretty big scare for him just in terms of the dehydration on the first day of practice, which is really significant. So nothing too crazy there. No more injuries aside from tackle Marcus McKethan, or other offensive guard, right guard for UNC last year, along with Josh Azudu, was on the left guard side. McKethan tore his ACL at FanFest, so he's out for the rest of the year. 5th round pick, really disappointing. Probably going to be a depth piece, rotational guy, backup, maybe a special teams player, but that really sucks for him. So wishing him a speedy recovery as always. But you know what? This is an interesting practice today, because we saw some guys that we don't normally hear about make some big practices, make some big plays. Notably, Darian Beavers out of Cincinnati, the linebacker. He's a big guy. He can rush the passer too. So I'm interested to see your thoughts about Darian Beavers. If you think he can maybe steal that starting spot alongside Blake Martinez, maybe compete with Tay Crowder. He's not the most athletic guy in the world. He's a little bit slow. But then, Tate Crowder's an average athlete as well. Darren Beavers isn't going to be a really good coverage linebacker. You're not expecting those guys to be, though. He can rush off the edge. He can do some unique things in a Wink Martindale system. How do you think they could get him involved, or do you think he's more of a practice squad player as a rookie 6th-round pick?
I think it's kind of up for debate, right? Because I think, when you're taking a look at Tate Crowder in that linebacker 2 position, I don't think that's locked in by any means. I think anybody can go ahead and steal that spot. I do think that's a competition that's going on right now during camp and will continue to intensify during preseason. Darien Beavers, as you mentioned, a guy that knows how to get after the quarterback. He can do some pass rushing stuff that guys like Tate Crowder really can't. And that's huge for what Wink Martindale is trying to do defensively. Wink Martindale uses his inside linebackers as off-ball linebackers as pass rushers rather frequently. He throws out really creative blitzes. You'll see defensive linemen drop in the coverage while linebackers blitz. You'll see cornerbacks blitz while the linebackers, drop into hook zones. Like, it'll get really creative out there in Wink Martindale's defensive scheme. So having guys like Darien Beavers, he's not a traditional pass rusher. That's not his position. He's not an edge rusher. He's not a defensive lineman, but he's got some pass rushing capabilities similar to a player of those positions. So when you're putting a guy like that at off-ball linebacker, that versatility comes in handy with what Wink Martindale is trying to do defensively. So, Tate Crowder has gotten the experience now. He's been a starter on the Giants defense for a couple of years, but that was in a totally different scheme. So it's kind of up for anyone, right? That position is up for grabs, and it's going to come down to who fits better in Wink Martindale's scheme. And right now, if you're taking a look at the skill sets, Darien Beavers might have the skill set that fits better. And let's not forget that Tate Crowder was a 7th round, the final draft pick in the 2020 or 19 NFL draft, blanking on which one it was, but he's a late round pick. So who's to say that 6th round pick Darien Beavers can't go ahead and steal that job from him, right? So I think that there's going to be a little bit of a competition here. This is one of the positions that I'm definitely keeping a very close eye on during preseason. That linebacker 2 position, very important for the Giants to solidify that before the regular season. And I don't exactly know who's going to take the job. Of course, if I had to make a projection, it's probably Tate Crowder because he's been the starter there for a couple of years. But I think that Tate Crowder kind of fits better when he's playing more coverage, more of a coverage role and more of just a run stopping role, but he doesn't really get too active as a pass rusher. So Darien Beavers has that on him and could potentially use that skill to make his way into the lineup. So keep an eye on Darien Beavers and his pass rushing capabilities throughout the preseason.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you're a pass rushing linebacker and you're in Wink Martindale's defense, you're probably going to get used a little bit, doing some unique stuff. So I would be surprised if he was on the field at some points and just getting some action. But the next player I want to discuss is Yusuf Corker at Kentucky. I mentioned before, a guy that spent, 13 games playing last year, had 82 total tackles, 36 assists, and 46 solos. He had a sack, 3.5 tackles for a loss, and 8 passes defended. He's an interesting player, defensive back listed, but he's a big guy at 6 feet, 197 pounds. He can do some stuff for you. He's a hard hitter. He had a really big hit on Antonio Williams today. I think that he's someone, they also gave him the ability to call plays. He never did that at Kentucky, but today they gave him the green dot. So he's actually been calling plays in the 2nd and 3rd string defenses, which obviously means that they value him. Like, there's something there that they believe they got a special player. If he's already calling plays on those 2nd and 3rd string defenses, just getting into the mix there. So I wonder if they start to utilize him on the 1st string in the coming weeks here as we lead up to the regular season. I'm sure we're going to see a lot of him in a couple of days during the first preseason game, which is pretty interesting because Brian Daboll said that everyone's going to get involved. They're going to be using Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley. They're not going to be resting these guys. They want to get them acclimated to a real life setting. And live action, not a simulation anymore. Obviously, this is real stuff. People are competing for jobs at this point, especially from other teams. So, this is legitimate. And I think that, using this opportunity to get a little bit of, comfort in the new systems is a good thing. Of course, injuries are definitely something to be aware of. But would you rather, I'll ask you this, Anthony, would you rather rest our guys and not use them in the preseason to avoid injury, or do you think you take the risk and you give them the opportunity to start getting better in the system? It's a tough one, but I think that if the Giants feel confident that their guys are healthy, they're conditioned well. Of course, a lot of these injuries are just like fluke things. You just don't know when they're going to happen. Non-contact stuff, it's just impossible to tell. Would you rather take the risk or, give these guys the experience they need to kind of get going with the new systems?
Personally, I put it discretion player by player, right? A player by player basis. Daniel Jones needs the reps. Daniel Jones has to go out there and play in the preseason, in my opinion, because everything that we've heard from training camp, some days he looks really good. He looks sharp. He's ready to go in this new offense. Other days, oh my God, what's wrong with Daniel Jones? This is going to be a terrible year for the Giants. So we got to see him in the preseason. He needs to get used to this offense. It sounds like, to me, a lot of what's going on. I'm hearing that he keeps missing throws outside of the hashes towards the boundary. That sounds like a timing thing to me. Maybe he doesn't have the timing down in this offense on some of those outbreaking routes. So I think that's more of what Daniel Jones needs, is to get used to the timing of some of the routes in this offense. And so I think that how he'll get used to that is through the preseason, just to get live game reps, even though it's with live game practice reps because it's an exhibition game. He needs that. He needs to put the full pads on. He needs a pass rush against him. He needs to practice this offense against real other teams, not just practice mode teams. He needs to go up against another team like the Pats in the preseason and see how he can settle into this offense and get comfortable. That's my opinion. Daniel Jones needs some preseason reps. Not too many, because you don't want your quarterback hurt, and he's been proven to be injury prone before, but you got to get him out there and get him used to this new offensive scheme. Saquon Barkley, he's a good player. I don't need to see him play in the preseason, not with how injury prone he is. Don't even put him out there, in my opinion. Kenny Golladay, same thing. He doesn't need to go out there. He's got too many injury problems. Kadarius Toney, I'd like to see get a few snaps just because he is a young guy. He could probably use the reps. And Wan'Dale Robinson, obviously, as a rookie, needs to go out there. Xavier McKinney, I think, will probably get a drive or two because this is his first year calling plays, and that's
right,
huge.
I'm scared of that.
But first year, I'm terrified of that, and we need Xavier McKinney to stay healthy this year. But the fact that it's his first year calling the plays, I think that's going to mean he has to play a little bit in the preseason, because you don't want those major miscommunication errors to occur during the regular season. But on that note here, talking about the green dot, talking about calling plays, Yusuf Corker and Darian Beavers, two guys that we just mentioned, they are calling plays in the preseason opener, which I think is a huge opportunity for those two players. I want to touch on that real quick, because I think when you're talking about, just rookies playing with the second and third team, putting the green dot on and calling the plays, basically you've got Yusuf Corker playing the Xavier McKinney role with the second team. And that's huge for him. That means that there's a lot of confidence from Wink Martindale in Yusuf Corker. Compare that to, Andrew Adams, a veteran that just came in recently. He doesn't have the green dot. And there's other guys out there that don't have the green dot. Yusuf Corker earned that green dot, which I think is super interesting. And same thing with Darian Beavers, because if we're talking about that linebacker 2 position, if he's calling the plays well, he could definitely move his way up into the starting lineup. So keep an eye on those things as well. And then, of course, talking about a few other players, Adoree Jackson, very injury prone. Don't put him out there in the preseason. A lot of these wide receivers are competing for their jobs, so they're going to have to. But Kayvon Thibodeaux, he doesn't need to play much, in my opinion. Maybe give him a couple drives. But, dude, if we have one of our major rookies get a significant injury, what are we watching for? The season is just going to be worthless to me if either Evan Neal or Kayvon Thibodeaux are injured. I'm so excited to watch these guys play. Bubble wrap them for the regular season. I don't need to see it. Kayvon Thibodeaux is going to be a proven stud no matter what. Don't need to see him play in the preseason personally. I think he's too valuable of a rookie to send him out there. A lot of these guys are too valuable to send out there, but as I mentioned, you got to keep in mind, these are brand new schemes, new offensive scheme that's vastly different from last year's scheme. Defensive scheme, maybe not vastly different, but it's different. And trust me, the play calling coming from the safeties instead, that's going to be a huge adjustment for some of these guys. We do need to see a lot of these defenders get out there on the field just to get used to calling those plays and having them come in from the safety position.
Yeah, I mean, look, these are the guys I would probably like to keep off the field for this first preseason game. I don't need to see Leonard Williams. I think that he's proven, we know what he is. I don't think that you risk injury to a guy that you're paying that much. I don't think you play Kenny Golladay for more than one drive, because I do think he needs to build more chemistry with Daniel Jones. His chemistry with Daniel Jones is kind of disappointing. We just don't see enough from those two. We need to see more. We're paying the guy $17 million. He's got to stay healthy. He's got to make an impact. And I think every single rep that they get together is beneficial. Other guys, I don't think we need to see Andrew Thomas. Please, God, do not start Andrew Thomas. I think Josh Azudu should just play left tackle. I do not want to see that man step foot on that field, because that ankle I am very concerned about. Today during practice, he went down and was limping. So God help me if they play him on Thursday, I'm going to lose my shit. Anybody else? I don't think Xavier McKinney necessarily needs to play. I do understand the idea of getting a couple of reps in just to call the plays, maybe one drive maximum. I don't need to see Adoree Jackson. I'd rather give Aaron Robinson and Cordell Flott reps. I don't think we need to see him. I think he knows the system. He's a good man coverage corner. He's used to that role. I don't really think it's necessary for Adoree Jackson to get any reps. Anybody else? I don't necessarily think we need to see Dexter Lawrence. We know his role. I think that he's a starter. You might as well give the reps to those backups, because I don't think Dexter Lawrence is going to benefit from getting one drive on defense. Anybody else that I have in mind? I don't want to see Blake Martinez. I don't want to get him too involved too fast because of that knee injury. I'd rather keep him fresh and healthy for the regular season. Anybody on offense? Maybe I don't really need to see Mark Lewinsky. I'd rather put Max Garcia at right guard because he's the guy that I think is on the roster bubble. So I don't think you need to see Mark Lewinsky necessarily. I think you probably utilize them maybe. See, here's the thing, and here's the argument. Would you rather play your starters in week 1 of the preseason or week 3 of the preseason? Because I do think that if they do get injured, you have the extra 2 weeks to come back from. So maybe you do want to play. If you're going to get them any action, maybe you want to use them in week 1 of preseason than week 3 of preseason, because at least if they do get hurt, they have that extra 2 weeks to get healthy, right? I guess that's kind of a logical way to look at it.
Sure, but there's also the argument that if you're getting them too involved too early and you're trying to get their body in game shape in week 1 of the preseason, they're already a little bit more worn down by the time we get to the regular season. So it's kind of, how do you think about it, right? It's like two schools of thought. And so that's kind of where it gets interesting. But of course, you got week 3 of the preseason, then a bye week, then the regular season. So you do have some recovery time there as well. It's not like you just go right into the regular season. But out of all the names you just mentioned of the veterans that I want to touch on is Andrew Thomas. This injury with his ankle has been going on for 2 years now. It was a problem during his rookie season. It got aggravated during his sophomore season. He just got surgery on it. And that sounds like he just aggravated again in training camp. This is concerning. They need to bubble wrap this man. Do not even put him out on the preseason field. I don't want to see Andrew Thomas out there in the preseason. I think it's very important for the offensive line to gel together in the preseason, but I don't care. Andrew Thomas, his ankle is obviously a problem and will continue to be if he doesn't get his way off of the preseason field. He doesn't need to go out there. He's proven to me. I think he knows what he's doing. And another player, John Feliciano, we mentioned him at the beginning of this episode. He's probably still dealing with some of those dehydration issues. They don't need to send him out there. He's a veteran. He knows what he's doing. Some of these guys that just are proven enough, there's no need to put them out there in the preseason. The preseason is really the time for these young guys on the back end of the roster to compete for jobs. I don't need to see too many of these starters, and I think it's super important for Andrew Thomas specifically that he doesn't see the preseason field.
Yeah, him specifically, I do not want to see. But some other takeaways from practice today: Xavier McKinney had a nice play in the left corner of the end zone, swatted a pass, so nice defensive play there. The Giants just recently acquired Nathan Meadors, former Cleveland Brown, so he was on waivers, so they claimed him. He actually had a nice interception today. Adoree Jackson had another interception today. The Giants were running 2v2 or 2-on-2 drills, 2 defensive backs and 2 receivers. Saquon Barkley had a couple of touchdowns from short yardage. So that was nice, and a couple touchdown passes to Kadarius Toney, Richie James. I think Richie James is going to steal Darius Slayton's spot on the roster personally, because he also offers you something on special teams as well. So Darius Slayton, man, he was during FanFest, he was with the 3rd string team guys. Like, Darius Slayton is in the doghouse right now. He also had a drop pass at FanFest. So in my opinion, the fact that he's making almost 2.5 mil, somewhere between $2 and $3 million, and he's dropping passes at this rate, and he's with a 3rd string team. I mean, he's either getting traded if anyone's willing to bite, or he's getting cut, because I think Richie James making probably a fraction of that is going to offer you that and special teams value. So if I was to guess, I'd say that, his Darius Slayton's days are numbered unless he has a standout next couple of days and just absolutely dominates during preseason, which right now I would assume is kind of unlikely. But who's actually been performing really well? Tyrod Taylor has been having phenomenal practices, throwing touchdowns, running it in. So he's been looking really good too. So at least we have a very competent backup. No more Mike Glennon, who, while has a phenomenally long neck, cannot actually complete passes. So, I like to see that we have a good, competent backup who can actually win football games. Tyrod Taylor is a capable guy. He can win those games for you. He can operate an offense at a decent level. And I think that's a good bonus for this team if Daniel Jones gets hurt, if anything happens to him, of course, knock on wood on that end. But I think that kind of wraps up today's episode, talking about a couple things from today's practice. Nothing too crazy. Some good takeaways. Obviously, Yusuf Corker, Darian Beavers, the standout performers from today. So keep those names in mind as we continue taking a look at practice updates and news. As always, my friends, make sure to like and subscribe. As always, hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Giants episode.